Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Game Changers for Government Contractors. I've got my friend Neil McDonnell here today, and we are going to be talking about a topic that is probably one of the hottest ones of the year. But before we hop into that and talk about DOGE and what all they're doing, Neil, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So Neil McDonnell, I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce. I actually started this back in 2018 after I got out of I had spent 20 years as a government contractor. And when I sold my last company, I noticed that a lot of us, including me when I was running my last company, weren't overly sure of the process for success in government contracting. So I started the GovCon Chamber with this idea of just helping small businesses everywhere. I like to say from Guam to the U.S. Virgin Islands and everywhere in between, be able to just understand government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. And anything I can do to share out the process is what I try to do. So that's the mission I'm on now.
That's awesome. And I will tell everybody, like I say on LinkedIn all the time, if you're not following Neil, if you're not following his newsletter, you need to be doing both of those things. He puts out some of the best content in the market. I think you have the largest GovCon newsletter in the entire industry that's out there. Ton of great stuff. You know, you do your daily lives on LinkedIn and just put out so much valuable content. And when I say valuable content, it's stuff that's not only on the mark, but it's accurate. And there's very few people that's like everything you put out is really, really good and people should consume versus there's so much stuff in the market that I'm like, oh my gosh, I cringe. Please don't consume that stuff, but that's not the case with you. Everything is so good. And I learned from you and really appreciate all the content you put out there. So.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I like putting out content. I say it's around federal sales. And so one of my favorite pieces of content to put out is research. So, if I find a deck that looks good, I don't keep it to myself. I'm like, hey, here it is. I do have customers I support on the side. And so as I'm helping them, I'm like, well, we don't need to keep it to ourselves. And sharing out that information, even something as simple as an org chart where people can all of a sudden see who's in there is good. And then, of course, sales tips wherever I can, like how to get in the doors. Just a really exciting thing.
It's very practical stuff, like, hey, have you ever thought about how you get into an agency? Well, I start with an org chart. I remember seeing that the other day. And then you had the org chart and kind of how you work through it and that kind of stuff, which is, it's such a simple thing that people don't think about and the value that's out there. And I think a lot of people, like I'm a research ninja. I consider myself a research ninja. A lot of people aren't, but you are not only a research ninja, I think you're an analyst as well to be able to think about the thing you want to look for, find it, and then like how do you apply it? What do you use it for? And it's a really unique gift that I think is really important to have in this industry. So it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It's funny, that org chart you're talking about, I didn't just share it like, hey, here it is, I'm just sharing content. I actually used it for a couple of my customers. And literally I got a meeting this Friday in a couple of days with a very senior head of contracting. And it was because I just did what I'm teaching. And that's something that's really important to me. It's like, I don't want to be teaching what I did. And I had 2 government contracting businesses and they were successful and I did good stuff, but I'm doing way better stuff now because I'm smarter on the process. And so I try to keep myself in the mix. But that org chart is just a great example. I wouldn't have known who that person was until I saw it, and then I just reached out. But it's fun.
And then once you know who, it's now you're on a mission to find their phone number, their email address, their whatever. But at least now you have the who. And there's so many tools out there to help you find the phone number and the email address, all the different kind of stuff. So it's just finding the name and then kind of going from there. So that's good stuff. So
I stole this line really quick. I stole this line from a guy named Gary Vaynerchuk. But if you're struggling to find the phone number, go to this place called GOOGLE. Right?
Yeah.
Like it'll pretty much answer any question.
Isn't that wild? I was actually going to say that earlier. How people have forgotten that Google exists. I mean, I get asked all kind of questions. I'm like, have you Googled that yet? And they're like, well, I just can't find this. I've been searching everywhere. I'm like, where have you been searching? I mean, Google's got it. I'm pretty sure. And people just forget that it exists. And LinkedIn is so powerful for different things. And so those are great resources to do some searching. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about DOGE. Unless you've been under a rock, you know what DOGE is and what's going on. Why don't you kind of start by maybe giving us a little bit of an overview of kind of what you think is going on with DOGE and the executive orders, kind of what the landscape is today, and then we can get into some questions and maybe talk about what the future of DOGE looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's an interesting conversation to have around DOGE, and I've been doing this since the new administration took place, where I dance this dance where it doesn't have to be a political conversation around DOGE.
Mm-hmm.
It's a reality.
Yep.
The Trump administration is the current administration, and DOGE is part of that. And the idea behind DOGE in the name, right, is efficiency. Is they're looking for efficiency in there. I have talked about this as well, where I say DOGE has come in pretty brutal. They pretty much have discounted considering people or companies, cutting contracts here and doing things like that. But the idea of DOGE is really something I think a lot of people can get behind. There's inefficiencies within the federal market, and whether that's in acquisition or how agencies are running or whether agencies are duplicative out there, that's theoretically what they're looking at. If I had a complaint, biggest complaints around DOGE, though, is I feel like they're not really including the existing experts. So whether it's industry like us or people who are inside of agencies, they have a lot of ideas of where efficiencies could go. And that's a big thing I've been trying to teach people is you have to, two things I say is DOGE yourself. And pretty much what I mean is if you're on the industry side and you have a contract, you need to put a bullseye on your chest and go, and pretend like you're DOGE. Have somebody in your company try to cancel your contract so that you can have awareness of that. We call it role playing in sales, but what objections would DOGE have to my contract? What can I do to protect myself from that? And to show value back to the government. I mean, it is our job to make sure we're showing value. And the other one is to start thinking a little bit more like DOGE. I don't mean become them, but this idea of if we're going after an opportunity, is this an opportunity and a requirement that the government has that's tied to agency essential services, their mission, et cetera.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I think that exercise of putting the bullseye on your own back or chest or wherever, forehead, wherever you want to put it, is also good just to look through and say, what value are we providing? And how do we continue to stay close to the customer? And how do we reinforce with the customer and look at other contracts with the customer? And I don't think enough people do that. I think people are so focused on the next target that they forget about the one they already have, and they don't serve that customer very well. And I could say that because when I look at the landscape of customer service overall, every industry, it's very poor. It's very poor in almost every industry you can ever imagine. And if people would just work on the customer service and keeping customers, then they wouldn't be spinning their wheels near as much as they are. So when it comes to DOGE, I love what you said right out of the gate around, not making it political or anything like that. I look at it as it really doesn't matter who's in the White House, who's in, the Congress or whatever. There's always going to be things you like, you don't like. And, every 4 years, there's probably going to be new things going on, new people coming in, new people going out, just all kinds of different things. And like the government's just this ever changing thing. And if we can just kind of focus on, well, what's the current administration doing? You can't put too much emphasis on what the next one's going to do, but what's the current one doing and how do we navigate this? And hey, change is inevitable. There's going to be more of it. So let's just navigate it and get through it. It's just at the end of the day, we need to survive. So how do we do that? When you look at what's going on with the executive orders, do you have a take on where you think some of this stuff is going to go? Because I know a lot of people have been looking at it over the past few months, and they're like, oh, well, this program's under attack, and this one's under attack, and this is going to go away, and just a lot of speculation. And then, the contracts, what's going to happen, and then you get into the executive order side, which is, there's DOGE specific ones, but then there's other executive orders about like the consolidation to GSA and things like that, which also kind of tie into being more efficient, right? So I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of thoughts. Like I think many of us have a lot of thoughts. One thing I will say that nobody knows, right? That's my favorite thing to start with.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows, but I can give you an experienced opinion kind of thing, because I've been playing this game for a long time, and you have, right? This idea, you can see where things are going. As you were talking about this, I remember this interview I did in the first Trump administration when I had just started the GovCon chamber. I actually called it the Hub Zone chamber because I was trying to address the fact that Hub Zones never got their goal that they should have in contract dollars. And anyway, so I got lucky enough to be interviewed on ABC, and I was completely prepared to talk about HubZone. I had facts, I had all these things, and I did a really good job. And the very last question the reporter asked me live, well, it wasn't live, it was recorded, fortunately. But the last question they asked me was, so President Trump's budget is coming through, and it's going to be this way. How do you feel about that? And where's that going? Was such a big question. It was more like it belonged on CNN and Fox at prime time or something. But what I said was, all I'm going to talk about is from the small business perspective. Small businesses need to understand one fundamental fact about politicians: they all spend. They just never stop spending. And so forget about our political positions. As a small business, are there contract dollars? What I was saying back in 2017, I think, was yes, there's contract dollars. And the difference between the Democrats and Republicans is just where they spend it, what their priorities are, to your point. And here, I just read an article, I think it was this morning or yesterday, not like I was trying to overly prepare it today, Michael, but in there, it was talking about how DOGE comes along and its stated purpose is to cut the spending, but the spending is actually up. And it'd be interesting to watch where the facts go. But this is what I've been teaching people in government contracting, is that always there's different priorities of change on the spending that's happening. For example, whether we're spending money on training. That's an example I've used. A lot of the training's kind of coming down, but what the training that's coming down is training that's related to maybe middle management training. We go in there and train middle management professionals within an agency. But the training that is always going to be there is mission critical training. So an example I gave to somebody was on soldiers. We're constantly having to train our soldiers to be able to execute on the mission, and things are changing. And so I see that there's a lot of turmoil in the market. If we just keep it in the government contracting world of the federal market, I see there's a lot of turmoil, but I'm also of that side of the fence that says, well, let me look for the opportunity. Where there is dirt, and a lot of dirt, there's got to be gold in there. And that's what I'm trying to do, is to say, how can I find the gold? And the only way I can find those opportunities is to look and kind of align with my customer. And my customer is the federal government. And this is my way of saying this: the federal government is just one single company, and the president of that company is the CEO of that company is President Trump. And all of these different agencies are all just different departments within. You think about Boeing; it's so big. It's the same kind of thing. It's just way bigger. And so what I do is I look in there and say, well, what is President Trump communicating with these executive orders? Where are they going? I'm looking at what they're saying about artificial intelligence and how I might find a play in there. I'm looking at what they're saying on the consolidation that you mentioned a second ago. And so I reached out to GSA. I'm talking to the people at GSA and trying to understand, what are you thinking about as you're consolidating common goods? As long as we keep embracing that, then as government contractors, we're able to align what we sell to what that changing need is within the current federal market, and find opportunities for ourselves.
Yeah. Well, so if you have somebody that's out there looking at this saying, this is just overwhelming, like, do you have, since you focus so much on federal sales, do you have like a few tips that you would give those small businesses to say, hey, I know this is going on, but here's 1, 2, 3 things that I would be focused on if I were you?
Yeah. The first thing you said was overwhelming. That's a big one. People just have to acknowledge that they are feeling overwhelmed. I literally had somebody who wrote me a message, said, hey, I'll see you in 4 years, kind of thing. Oh. And they were alluding to the fact it was just so crazy in the federal market. Yeah. But then I saw her in multiple other trainings I'm doing and networking events. And I felt good about it because I'm like, look, just stay in here. It's going to be hard wherever you go. Commercial market's hard. Mm-hmm. I've never been a fan of somebody who says the federal market's harder than the commercial market or state and local. I've been a sales guy selling vacuum cleaners door to door, being chased by dogs at the state, the nonprofit, the commercial level, and the federal level. And one thing I've learned is sales is just hard. You learn the skill, you knock on doors, but it's not really any easier or harder in any place. That said, I actually think it's easier in the federal government, but that's another thing. But you have to, I would say the first thing people have to do is just acknowledge that they are feeling overwhelmed in this kind of stuff. And the first step I would give them to kind of start addressing that is to don't be alone. Don't pull in.
Mm.
Instead, come out. There's a lot of us who do events. I know our friend Rich just did a GSA networking event, I think yesterday, talking about GSA. But just even going to those events, you can engage and you see somebody who's upbeat about how do I succeed in GSA.
Mm.
You go to my events that I have. There's all sorts of people like me and you who are creating these environments where you can come in. And I really believe the more people you're around, the less the things that are happening to you are going to be stressful. You'll be able to start seeing it a little bit. The second thing is I would reevaluate completely what your company sells. And this reevaluation can take far less than a week, but just hit the whiteboard, right? I live and breathe on a whiteboard, but turn around and go, what am I selling? And is this really what the government needs? And if it's not a clear thing, then how can I align it? People like you and me can help them. They can go to the Apex accelerators to get clarity on just what's being offered. And they can also just listen to the executive orders and the things that are happening out there to see, am I selling what the government is buying this year? And I talked about training. It's like if you do training, you need to reevaluate your training. I don't need you to stop training, but just start training on the right things. Maybe train on cybersecurity or AI, like align to what the government is saying. And then that third thing after that comes into just, um, you know, people have to decide whether they can truly prime at this time or whether they can sub. And I believe people don't subcontract enough. I'm literally doing it with a customer who's good at priming, but they're actually upping to like 60% their subcontracting activity because now they can get on with other successful companies. There's a lot of us are being hit by this impact, and there's some companies who aren't really getting hit that hard and are still succeeding. It's like, well, go find them and try to embrace a relationship with them.
Yeah.
Those are three quick things off the top of my head.
Those are all really good. And I'll kind of comment on the last one first there. One of the things that I found from just visiting events and things is, and I just saw this at an event I spoke at last week where somebody was on stage and they said, we do not sub. Like, huh, that's interesting. And then you run across other people who are like, hey man, we're trying to prime and we're not winning. And like, oh, do you have any past performance? No. And you start talking to people and like, I understand you want to put your big boy pants on and be a prime, but you still need your training wheels. You're not ready for that. And even if you did, why would you not take a subcontract? Why would you just say no to that? And because it's an ego thing. It's like this pride ego thing where they feel like, oh, I'm not a big boy or big girl unless I have a prime contract. I was like, well, no, I mean, it's all the same color of money. Like it all spends, it'll all pay your mortgage, it'll all pay your employees. So, why don't you go just get some contracts and get some past performance and then grow up and be a big boy or big girl. And so that's a pet peeve of mine to see that one.
I tell people, it's like, I don't teach anything. Like there's nothing overly unique about what I teach. I teach the fundamentals, and you can look around at people like you and me and others. And it's like, we're all kind of basically teaching it. I teach that there's three revenue streams in the federal market. There's subbing under a small, prime contracting, and subbing under a large. And that's the order you should do them in.
Mm-hmm.
And the subbing under small is where I get the experience, and I also get the money to feed my family and my employees.
Yeah.
And then I can go, hey, I got some past performance. Let me go get a few low-level primes. And then the large is like Booz Allen or somebody who goes,
Yeah.
oh, hey, you've got an expertise. Come on in. I think part of it is a pride that people have. But I also think this comes back. I think people just don't understand that those are the options. And that's something I try to hold myself to, Michael, is remembering that so many people, they just started a business, but they don't know how to run it. And I was the exact same. I was very good at Microsoft SharePoint. I didn't know how to run a business or something.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I think not only that, it's they're trying to figure out three things. One is, how do I be a business owner? Two is, how do I run my niche, whatever my niche is? And three is, how do I navigate the federal government? They're trying to figure out three things. And if they're not sure about any of that stuff, they're in this constant learning loop is what I look at it as.
Yeah.
And you're just going uphill all the time. And I'm amazed at people that have been in the market for 1, 2, 3, 4 years, and they have no clue what's going on. They don't know about what's going on with the executive orders. They don't know about the NDAA. They don't know about a change that just happened to their NAICS code. They don't know about, all these things. They don't know the data bank in SAM because they're like, oh, I thought this, or I just registered. I didn't know there was all this valuable
I
information.
talked to a large, people who are doing large businesses are like, this FBDS stuff you're teaching is magic. I'm like, oh my God, you've been stuck in GovWin forever.
Yeah,
You didn't realize that all these tools are just pulling the data from the
yeah,
government.
yeah,
And that's when I'm like, okay, it's not because you're just ignorant, and not in a bad way ignorant.
yeah,
Just you're ignorant of you just don't have awareness of these
yeah,
things. And that's why I like when you spread the word or I spread the word about uh, some of these fundamental things that if you just got good at them, then you'll have success on your own without us.
hmm
With us, we might accelerate it a little bit,
yeah,
but you can do this on your own.
yeah. And that's when I look at a company and they're not doing well. It's goes back to the sports analogy of like, are you doing the fundamentals? The basic blocking, tackling. Are you practicing catching and hitting and those very basic things? Because I think they just try to finesse it and they get too creative. And I think as entrepreneurs, it's very easy to get too creative and be like, oh, we're going to try this really complex way to reach out to people. And it's like, no,
Yeah.
this really complex, thing we're going to do in a proposal and we've got to win it. And because we just, we went to a workshop and they taught us how to write a proposal. And yeah, but you don't know the customer and you haven't done the legwork and you haven't been in a relationship and you haven't done this and you haven't done that and you haven't done your sub work and all those things that it takes. And it's just a matter of, like you keep reiterating there, the fundamentals, those very simple, basic things of even knowing how much needs to be in your pipeline at any given time, based on what's going to close and what your win rate is and all those kind of things. And it's just very easy for people to get, in my opinion, like romanced by the fun stuff and not focus on the fundamentals, like you've been talking about. So
And by the way, I've been exactly there. I
yeah, you've been
remember
there.
spending $1,400 per person when I started my last company. My wife was helping at the time, so a couple of us went to this event, and it was like a 3-day event, and we spent, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours on NAICS codes and stuff.
Yeah,
It was just brutal. But what I realized is that it's just this process that people don't understand, that if they actually followed it, it would move forward. It's something I'm trying to put together right now. I call it the small business maturity model, just kind of going off of any capability maturity model or whatever
yeah,
in that software
yeah.
side.
Yeah, the CMMC, but the
Yeah, yeah. And so, but this idea of like, do this, do this, do this. I literally am almost at this point where I want to tell people who are getting into government contracting, don't start a company and don't register in SAM. Go see if you can get a 1099 gig with somebody. And if you can, then go, hey, can you hold on a second? So I start a company, get in SAM, give you my 1099, we'll call it a subcontract, and you're off to the races. But we spend time doing all what I like to call constructive procrastination. These things that are, kind of important, but they're not the
100%,
thing you need to be doing. And
100%.
right now, you just need to get moving.
Yeah, 100%. I remember my first business coach ever was a Tony Robbins coach, and I remember, and it was probably our first session, maybe our second session. I was like, "Hey, I'm really I'm hung up on my business card. Like, what should be on my business card, and this and that." And she let me talk for 5 minutes, and then she said, "Do you think Tony Robbins has a business card?" And I was like, "What?" And she was like, "Do you think he has a business card?" I'm like, "No." She's like, "And he's successful, right?" "Yeah." "Well, why do you think you need one?" And you're like, you're obsessing over this thing when you should be, getting your ass out there and actually doing something productive.
Yeah.
You're obsessing on, well, should I put my address on there? It's just my phone number. Should I not put my phone number, email address? Should my name be in this color? And what should be that? Like, you're obsessing over all those things that don't matter, but they feel good. And they feel like you're making progress when they're just wasting time and they're procrastinating from picking up the phone, sending an email, whatever it may be. And I'm like, well, not only does that make sense because I'm working remotely at the time and I don't have any in-person anything coming up for the next 6 months. And I'm obsessed about who I'm going to hand a card to and what it's going to look like. And like when you hear it out loud, you're like, say it in a way that doesn't sound stupid, because it's like,
Those are the hacks and secrets, right?
Yeah.
The most basic information. It's like, do you really need a business card? Not if you're not on LinkedIn. I mean, this is kind of a modern thing. I always said if you spend more than 24 hours to come up with your company name, you spent too long. You can always rename your company. Just pick something and go.
Yeah, yeah. And people just obsess about it. And it's just all those things that we just, hyper focused on. I worked for a CEO one time that we would put out these press releases, and we were a small public company. We put out these press releases where he'd spend days just agonizing over 3 or 4 words in it. He was like,
Yeah.
I'm not sure about that word. And I'm like, you realize like nobody's going to read this, right? Like nobody's going to read this. No one cares. But he was just, it had to be perfect. So he was proud of it. It's like, not even your mom's going to read it. Like no one's going to read it.
That's the
You know,
thing. That's the thing. My sister Cecilia has been in my world, the GovCon chamber world, since 2018, helping, and she has this great line that I think she said she got it from my mom way back when. But you'll stop worrying about what people think about you when you realize how little they think of you.
yeah.
Like how infrequently they think
Yeah.
of you. They're not even thinking of you.
Yeah.
I posted something, and you saw this, but I posted on LinkedIn something yesterday, or maybe it was Monday, within the last 2 days, because I'm doing this conference coming up, a GovCon conference, and I wanted to put the word out to get a wait list to see if people were going to be interested. And to put this out, I looked at my hard drive and I was like, oh, hey, that picture looks good. It was me and this other guy. We're at a conference. We're smiling and laughing. So I put that in there and I wrote a couple of lines, like simple lines like, hey, I'm doing a conference. If you're interested, join the wait list. And that's all I wrote. And we got like 300 people who registered or joined the wait list. I could have spent weeks trying to get the perfect thing to get people to attract in there, and I could have got less people showing up or something.
Yeah.
It really is coming down to putting 80% of your energy into a very few things, and a lot of that stuff you think needs to be getting done should take up only 20% of your energy.
Absolutely. And to just tag on to that, I think in that example you just gave, most people would say, okay, I'm going to agonize over this because this is the golden egg here. This is the golden goose, golden egg, whatever. This is going to be my ninth symphony. This is going to be the thing that just makes it rain.
People are going to judge me on this thing.
Yeah, people are going to judge me on it. And they put it out there and it's crickets. It doesn't work. And it's like, why not just put something out there, like in your situation, and then, oh, man, that really worked. I wonder if I could now work on the thumbnail and get another round and improve and that kind of stuff. But now that we've tested it and this is viable, now we can look at, well, how do we amplify it? How do we optimize it and stuff like that? If people would just take action, they would figure out how to do that. But they're so stuck in inaction and procrastination that they don't do it. So it's good stuff.
It goes back to your DOGE thing, by the way, just really quick. What do we do and where are we going? And I get that some of this stuff that's coming out of DOGE and the activities they're doing is brutal and really impactful. But that's what's happening to us, that line that says you can't choose what happens, so you can only choose your reaction. And this is where we have control. And that's the thing. It's like getting people to see that they are in control, even though all this crap is happening. They are in control of what they do next.
Right.
They can't change anything just happened. My contract was closed. I lost multiple contracts.
Yep.
You did. There's no changing that fact. And happy to sit down and have a beer and talk about how horrible it is.
Yeah.
Or I'd rather sit down with you and have a cup of coffee and plan on, how do you recover from losing contracts or far fewer opportunities in your area or something. It's like, let's pivot. And this happens all the time in Silicon Valley. We bet on owners or entrepreneurs. We don't bet on the idea. And this is something really good that industry in the GovCon space could learn is stop even seeing yourself as your company idea, et cetera. Instead of see yourself as the team, you and your colleagues, and go, we are capable. Let's pivot. The same way in Silicon Valley, they might pivot.
Yeah. One of the things that reminded me of when you were talking about that was when I look at a lot of companies, they have this belief, and I'm just going to call this out. It's a belief. It's not a fact that they're already doing things at peak efficiency. Like we're already running the company at peak efficiency. I'm like, you're running a $2 million company. I don't want to bust your bubble. It's not peak efficiency, or it'd be 50 million or 100 million to $1 billion, right?
I teach efficiency and I'm not running at peak efficiency.
Exactly, right? And so they don't know what they don't know, and that's where that extra knowledge comes in, and insight or little bitty tips. Because like I had a client who was actually in the efficiency business, and I sat down with them and I was looking at like their keywords they were searching on, and they were hyper focused on these three keywords. And I said, okay, well, let me do a little research. And I found like another 15 they should be using. I was like, so out of the government spend last year, there was, $500 billion or whatever it was in the category, right? It was a huge number. And I said, when I look at your keywords, it accounts for 15 million of the 500 billion. Like, so you're not even searching the right stuff.
Yeah.
That's why you don't have enough opportunities. Because, when I hear somebody say, well, I don't have enough opportunities to look at, well, you're clearly not operating in the most efficient manner here. There's some things we can tweak because you should have more than enough things to swing at. It's just a matter of figuring out how to do it. So I think for one piece of advice that I would have for people that are worried about DOGE and know this is shutting down or whatever is it's time to reevaluate like what you're doing. You were talking about looking at the products you sell and things like product services, but I think, how you search for things, what you're searching for, and, are you searching for the right stuff? We always call it who buys what you sell, how much, how often, propensity. And it's like, are you running a report well enough, not just on a NAICS code, on some keywords, running it 3 or 4 different ways? Because that's another one. Like I see people get in Google and go, well, I searched and I couldn't find it. Okay, well, change your search. Well, I still can't. Well, change your search. I guarantee it's in Google. You're just calling it the wrong thing.
It's your mindset, Michael. And that's what would be great if people, I'm not an expert at mindset shifting for people.
Yeah.
But this idea that you believe it's in Google.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, something must be wrong with my search. Where the other person's like, they're basically coming at it with, it's not in there.
Yeah.
and people like us were like, it's in there and I'm finding it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why we find it. It's not like we have some miracle cure. It's because we have determination to get the answer, and we'll do whatever it takes to move forward the way you're describing.
Yeah, that's another one where it's like, so say that so it doesn't sound stupid. It's not in Google. Come on. Like Google's got everything. It's got stuff you deleted 20 years ago is probably somewhere. I mean, I was telling somebody the other day, I don't know if you know about this. Have you ever used the Wayback Machine?
I've heard of it. I never used it, but yeah you were telling me, I think maybe a little bit ago. Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. You get in the Wayback Machine and it's a website and it's been taking snapshots of your stuff forever. So you can see like the first version of your website that was ever on the internet. It's on there. And
cool.
You don't even have it on your stuff. You're like, man, what did we do that worked really well? Let's go back. And it has a calendar at the top, and you can see the dates where major changes happened in your website, and you can look at it. And people don't know that stuff exists. And it's like, well, I mean, I know there's a lot of things I don't know exist, but I know the information you're looking at, names, addresses, phone numbers, who's buying this, that, and the other, that stuff exists. And that's, you alluded to that earlier of saying, well, I don't want to say it's easier, but I do think it's easier to buy in the federal market or sell in the federal market because all the information's there. There's no Rolodex for the most part that's accurate because there's Info USA and whatever that product is now. It's so not accurate on small business information. But this, the one that we use, sam.gov, people use still FPDS and different things. That data is fairly accurate for the most part. Sometimes there'll be extra zeros and stuff, but for the most part, it's pretty accurate. So I think people just, like you said, they need to change their mindset and focus on that. So any closing thoughts as we round out this episode on DOGE, and maybe like if you had to look into a crystal ball down the road and say, over the next 6 to 12 months, over the next year, if I had to take a guess, this is what I think is going to happen with DOGE, and how that's going to affect the market.
Yeah, so I think DOGE is going to go away. So this is my first time saying this out loud to a degree. But with Elon Musk being the leader of DOGE, I mean, he is the President Trump to DOGE as he is to the Republican Party, and all of his momentum. Well, he's focused on Tesla now and his companies. He's really got to go back and do stuff, and so he'll be sliding out himself. And this is just my personal opinion. I believe DOGE is going to become like, for those of us who've been around a little bit, like the digital services that came on like during Obama's time, where he's bringing in Silicon Valley. And those people pissed off industry as well, because they would come in and say, I mean, I was working in the White House when those guys were coming in and Obamacare, whatever the Affordable Care Act,
Affordable Care
that
Act, yeah.
website was being built by traditional government contractors, large billion-dollar firms. They were wasting a lot of money, and it just didn't, or spending a lot of money. Let's not judge, but they were spending a lot of money, and
might have had it right.
I mean hundreds of millions, and it couldn't launch. And they brought in these guys, and they came in. And the point is, digital services was going to be this next big thing. And they started going into some of the agencies, and then pretty soon they just became another office within agencies. And they were remembering themselves, in my opinion, as the good old days back in 20 whatever it is, 16 or something. And in DOGE, I feel like it's kind of the same thing, where they're in these agencies, and they're basically just going to start becoming efficiency things. I use this example. I think I was talking to my wife about it. Is that I feel like DOGE, once the leadership of Elon Musk is gone, DOGE will no longer have a centralization of power. It'll be inside of each agency, and so now the bureaucracy of the agency is like an ocean, and it will start compressing DOGE. I think DOGE has accomplished its mission, not Elon Musk's vision, but it's accomplished its mission, which is to shake things up, to try to find some low-hanging fruit wins in their eyes, and get that done. And now it's going to move forward. And what I'm recommending to industry and agencies is to recognize that DOGE was just a tipping point. They're not the leaders in it. Government employees and industry are the leaders in this. And these DOGE personnel, by the way, from what I know, I don't know any of them, right? But from what I know, they're transactional. They have a lot of other interests. They're more like entrepreneurs than they are career employees. So I don't see them sitting there forever. And to keep that momentum is really hard. One thing we didn't talk about, we don't have to keep going far into it, but AI is here to stay. And that has enabled DOGE to do a lot of what it did. And so I would tell industry, and I've said this a lot, make sure you are figuring out what's your AI play in there, so that when you go back in, you're kind of keeping that momentum of DOGE, of government efficiency, but it's being led now by people who know the agency's mission, et cetera, and care about the agency's mission.
I agree with everything you said. You know, I constantly find myself reminding people, they're like, well, Elon Musk is this and that and that stuff. Don't you remember when he was on the campaign trail back in, I don't know, September-ish timeframe? They said he was going to come in, September, October, whatever it was. He was going to come in, he was going to be there till the summer, and then he had, focus on Mars at that point. He's got other stuff he needs to do. And so we know from the very beginning that he was going to come in, go out, and when there's a super powerful leader, like you just said, when that powerful leader steps out, things have to change. So even if it were to stick around, it's going to be different. And I think in his press release the other day, he said exactly what you said, that they've accomplished the majority of the work they wanted to do. And now, it's going to wind down a bit. It doesn't mean it couldn't spin up again. Doesn't mean there's nothing else going on, but I do see that changing. And so, like, I see us getting into the new normal, hopefully by, Christmas of 25 or earlier. I still think, we're recording this today in April, I still think the GovCon Q4 is going to be bonkers. Like there's so much to do, and it's like, okay, we got stuff to get done. And then maybe even the FYQ1 for the next year for them. It's going to be very interesting to see how this rolls out. But I echo everything you were saying about it. So it's going to be interesting. So
the thing people have to remember is the budget does not appear to be changing, like the total budget. Now you have to do what you said you guys teach is you have to find where what they're buying and where they're buying it from. That thing that all of us have been teaching. Yeah. If you just do that, then you'll be able to move your government contracting business in the direction that'll be successful.
Yep. I think the word we've heard way too much over the last 4 years with COVID and everything else is you got to be ready to pivot. You got to be ready to pivot some way, shape, or form, or go back to the commercial market or do something else or sell something else. It's like, it doesn't mean government going away doesn't mean that you can't continue to sell. It's just, how are you going to pivot? And back to the mindset aspect of it is, if you think I will pivot and I will pivot over here and this is what I will do, we will survive. It's just a matter of what we're going to sell to. I think that's really important for a lot of folks. So
that's a perfect way to end it. It's like, we will survive. Now we just got to figure out how.
Yeah, we just got to figure out how. So, man, thank you so much for coming and talking about this. I could talk to you for probably hours, and I know we're both busy guys. So
Yeah, I appreciate it.
But thank you so much. I'll love talking with you, and we'll see you next time.
Perfect. Thanks, Michael.